don't remember any of them to be fine. I'm far right about the beat girl, bro.
All right, so we're gonna talk about next sections. All right. The next thing we're gonna learn about is extrema. What is extrema? Like a highest point and a lowest point, right? So we can say we can categorize they are the highest point or lowest point. So in the region, probably in like depends on which region you talk about. The highest point and lowest point. Okay, so now we're gonna have something called extreme value theorem, which is categorized as EVT. Now, EVT is not a very popular theorem, but is sometimes it is tested. The more often you get tested is IVT. Do you guys remember IVT? Intermediate value theorem. Then there's also another one that's the most frequent tested, which is we're going to talk about it tomorrow or day after. It's called mean value theorem. But EVT is a fairly easy. That's why AP exam doesn't really test it. Maybe part of multiple choice they will test it. But I just say if f is continuous, so it has to be follow is f is continuous. And between A to B, then f must have minimum and a maximum. So EVT basically just say if a function is continuous between one endpoint to another endpoint, including the endpoint. That's why it's bracket. Now, why you need to have those two? So first one, it has to be continuous. Second one has to be the endpoint included. Let's give you a situation, the counter example of extreme value theorem, which is this is situation doesn't work. So do not work does not work because it failed a condition. Now I'm gonna give you some easy one. The easy ones recognize like, okay, what if you have open circle and open circle here and the straight line through there? Now, the thing is, we know that this one doesn't have minimum value. The reason why it doesn't have minimum value is because we don't know it's negative 1.9 or negative 1.99 or negative 1.999 because it's not really defined. Right? It's not defined to a point. It's we can say the lowest value is 1.9, but negative 1.9, or the highest value is negative 2. Or positive 2.9. But how many 9 I'm gonna put in? I don't know, because it's open circle, so we don't know how close we can get. So it's not defined maximum value, not defined minimum value. So the second example does not work is like this. What if you have 2 points? And we say I have this point and I have this point, even though it's not continuous, not a problem is that minimum value is not defined because there is an open circle. Now asymptote is worse. Asymptotes, you don't even know there's this minimum value because it's going to negative infinity or positive infinity. So a hole would be a perfect example of why it doesn't work. So these two conditions are really important. It has to be continuous and has to including A and B. If it doesn't including A and B, I can have open circle. Any questions so far? Very intuitive. They're not very, very difficult. Now I'm gonna give you a situation where okay. Let's say if I have endpoint continuous everything, right? So the endpoint, the highest point of endpoint is called endpoint extrema. And but in the middle region, we actually, if there is the maximum minimum extrema, we call it relative. So why do we call it relative? For example, this point is relative minimum. And this point is relative maximum. And this point is a relative minimum. Now, what's the difference between relative and absolute? Relative, also in, let's just say if you decide to go to school in, let's say, England, they don't call it relative, they actually call it local minimum. They actually call it local, but instead of relative. But that's different languages, even though it's in England. Or let's just say if you in America, there's IB program. Like if you go into Winter Park, there's IB program. If you go to Cypress Creek, there's IB program. University High School has IB program. They don't call it relative, they call it local minimum. Okay. Now, the relative has to have a two action happen. It has to be a decreasing, increasing in order to have a minimum. Cannot be just decreasing straight down to the lowest point. That's not called relative. Relative, it has to have two actions, going down and up or down. So it wants one follow another, has two actions happen. Olivia, are you okay? You look like you're sleepy. Am I that boring? Okay. Anyway, so for this point is actually is known as absolute maximum. And this point not only relative, it can have two names, it can have absolute minimum. Okay, it can have absolute. So absolute is going to be lowest point or highest point on the interval. In term of IB system, we call it global instead of local. So global, like local minimum is like that region, right? But global is the entirety of everything. So in here we call it absolute. Yes.
So absolute and relative can be at the same point.
It can be, yeah. But the relative is more. I think it has a requirement. Has to either it has decreasing and increasing or increasing decreasing. Had to follow two actions. Where a absolute can go all the way up. So for example, this one is absolute, but it's going all the way up, never come back down. But this is absolute maximum. They cannot be relative here because it doesn't have a second action. Okay, so hopefully that clarify a lot of things. Now, this is all the things that you need to know for this particular situation. We're gonna define something called definition of critical number. So definition of critical number. So what is a critical number? There are two situations categorized as a critical number. One is f must be defined, but it's basically f prime of c is equal to 0. That's a first situation. Second situation is f prime of c is undefined. Okay, So, two situations. We already do a lot of calculation on the first situation. The first situation we called it a long time ago on a derivative test. What do we call? What are we looking for when we're looking for f prime c equal to 0? What are we looking for? Horizontal tangent. Good job. So remember horizontal tangent. And what's f prime c is equal to undefined? Where does that happen? Vertical tangent. Good. So this is a vertical tangent. Vertical tangent. Sometimes the cusp is one of them. So sometimes the cusp could be one of the situations. Now, so yeah, we already done this before. It's not like we didn't done. Now we just have a different name for it. If I say find a critical number, if they basically take a derivative, set it equal to 0, or take a derivative, the denominator of the derivative equal to 0. What denominator? Denominator equal to 0. The f prime of x is undefined. Now here's something that's kind of important. This is something that very critical for you. If f have a relative, has to be relative, right? Maximum and relative minimum occur at C, at x equal to C, then x equal to C must be critical number. By the way, I'm going to create a drawing for this one. The drawing for f prime c equal to 0 looks like this. So something like this. This is C. This is a horizontal tangent, right? This is f prime of c is equal to 0. Is that okay? That's when it's horizontal tangent. You could have this case is like this. Like this. This is f prime of c is equal to undefined. So that is a cusp. So something like this. So you can have those two situations. However, there's something that people don't understand this. If f has relative maximum and minimum occur at c, then that's a critical number. But if it's the other way around, is that true? So if I reverse this, the way I say, if x equal to c is critical number, does that mean that particular point has relative maximum min? No? Somebody say no. Lee, you say no, right? Why not? Instinct. You're almost ND level. Almost. So Andy's gonna help you here. Okay, Andy, can you help him?
Could it be like a prolonged period of zero slope?
Okay, well, can you give me an example?
Y is equal to 1.
Y equal to 1. They can be critical number on all the situation there. Oh, okay, good job. Lee?
X cubed, right?
X cubed, good job.
Any level.
Yeah. Okay. These is going to ND level right now. Super Saiyan mode. Right? So look at this. F of x, f of c is equal to 0, but it's not max and min. But the other way is okay. Do you remember, like in geometry, the teacher says, you know, all square are rhombus, but not all rhombus are square. So a specific kind of rhombus is a square. Yeah. What's the rhombus? It's only happening, okay. You know what's funny is that those people might have an A in geometry.
Yeah, no.
I was reading this podcast this morning. It's like the great inflation. Like people just have A's all the time, but it actually destroyed our education.
Like, okay.
All square are rhombus,
All square are rhombus,
but not all rhombus are square.
but not all rhombus are square.
Yeah, specific kind of rhombus is a square.
Do I have to know this?
No.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh boy, how does people pass geometry, man? You failed geometry?
I got an A in it.
What did I say? What did I just say? All right, so how do I find an extrema? Oh, by the way, sorry, I'm gonna come back to here just a little bit here. If ever ask you what's absolute max value, again, the keywords value on AP exam, when they ever ask you value, please put in mind the value is equal to value, but with a y on it. So it's the output. So if I ask you where is the absolute maximum value, you're gonna count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So max value is equal to 8. Is equal to 8. It's a value equal to y value. Make sure that is, so that's why I call it YU. Every time I mention something, I would say if they ask me value, always looking for y. The key word you're looking for on AP exam is they ask you value, that means y value. They never ask you x. If they say where does x occur has absolute maximum value, in this case it's gonna be like 5, 10, 13. Where do they occur? Occur at x equal to 13. If I ask you maximum value, you're gonna say is equal to 8. Is that okay? It's an output, not an input. So AP exam is something that you have to pay attention. Let's go back here. And then they say, okay, well, that's fine. How do I find extrema within the intervals? Now, I will say is this. You don't have to really understand calculus to AP exam. You just have to be able to beat the rubric. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Understand calculus requires different level. Okay, I will say it's like even half the people who score 5 on AP exam doesn't understand calculus. Okay, that's just how it is. But if you understand the rubric, you can get a 5. So that's something. So understand the rubric. So, and unfortunately, I'm going to teach you how to beat the exam, but I also teach you how to beat the calculus, which is like stuff like related rate, even though it's not on AP exam. Critical number of F between A to B. Well, why is not inclusive A to B? Because A and B is not differentiable. Okay, but you can say, well, it's not differentiable, that's undefined, that should be a critical number. But that's why they say it's not A and B, not including A and B. So 2, which is a really big thing, is AP exam really wants you to do this. Fill the table. If they ever ask you absolute maximum value, absolute minimum value, or justify just for justification. So when AP exam say justify something, I don't know how to spell justify. J-U. I feel like supper. justify, if they ever say justify that this is absolute maximum value, then you have to build a table. Always build a table. And the table must evaluate the critical number. Third thing is evaluate the endpoints. So at the end, you have to figure out, you have to evaluate that y value at the endpoint, because maybe that y value is higher than relative maximum. So therefore, you have to evaluate the endpoints. So there are 2 points, right? Between A to B. So there's 2 points, A and B. C, last step 4, you compare them. You compare them, values, right? So the highest is absolute max, and the lowest is absolute min. And you compare them. We're going to give you an example. So for example, let's say f of x is equal to 3x to the 4th minus 4x to the 3rd. Now today you're going to have different derivative. I'm just going to give you an easy one. Can you find a critical point here between this value? And also build a table, evaluate the endpoint, and evaluate the critical points. So we got f of x equal to 3x4 minus 4x third. How do I find a critical point? Take a derivative. Good. So let's take a derivative. So that's 12x to the 3rd minus 12x squared. And you have to set it equal to 0. Right? What do I do next? Factor what? GCF? 12x squared? Like, remember, how do you find when the ball hit the ground? You had to factor out GCF. Usually negative GCF helps. Let's say, for example, that question that you just did is going to be -4, not -16. Because -16 is not factorable for audible. So -4 is factorable for audible. So it's going to be 12x squared times x minus 1. And that's going to be x equal to 0, x minus 1 equal to 0, x equal to 1. So there's 2 critical numbers. Now this is a table they were interested about. Now you're going to be like, wait, Mr. Ye, you just plug in every single value, every single integer. But it's not true. If I have one critical number, I can skip one of those values. If I have no critical number, then I skip both. So that here you must including the endpoint. The endpoint is going to be at -1 and 2. The critical point is going to be by 0 and 1. But you have to compare all the values here. But this is a critical number. So critical number, this is Cn, this is critical number, this is endpoints. This is endpoints. Is that okay? EP stands for endpoint. Cn stands for critical numbers. Now it seems like I do every single number. It's not true. Only in the critical number. But today, if I just have one critical number, I don't need to do 0. But you must including 2 endpoints though. So I'm going to evaluate this. So if I plug in -1, what number am I going to get? What number I'm going to get? Come on. That's 7. What happened if you plug in 0?
0.
What happened if you plug in 1?
-1.
What happened if you plug in 2? Oh, that's it.
16.
That was quick. Good job, Andy. So this is absolute max value because that's the highest one. And this is absolute min value. And that's it. That's how you've done this type of style question. On AP exam, they could be asking like a lot of things, like if the things furthest right or furthest left, if we have particle motion. And they could have asked you that says maximum of people in the park. So that's an FRQ. That's kind of silly, but yeah, you just had to beat the rubric.
What equation did you plug in?
I plug in the original. Plug in the original. Not a derivative, because you don't want looking for slope, you're looking for the values. Any question in this part? All right, I'm gonna go to the next question. F of x equal to 2x minus 3x to the 2/3. Now, put in mind, 2/3 power means the even over odd power. What kind of situation is that? Even over odd power? It's a cusp. Right? It's cusp. Now, interestingly, this one, the critical number, a little bit unexpected. So can you find a critical number for me in here? This is a little bit of plot twist here. Okay, so can you find a critical number, and I'm going to tell you if you did it right or wrong. Just take a derivative that equal to 0. But imagine that people have a whiteboard and take an AP exam on a marker. I think it would do significantly better. Just take a picture. That should be on your what's it called, 504 plan. The kid need a marker. You create your own plan. So how many critical number you find?
2.
2. It is 2. Because if you take a derivative here, and that's equal to 2 minus 3 times 2 over 3 times x to the negative 1/3. 3 is going to cancel out. That's going to be 2 minus 2x to the negative 1/3. And you're going to be like, oh yeah, I'll just set equal to 0. And this is the wrong way of doing it. 0 equal to 2 minus 2x to the negative 1/3. And that's equal to 2 equal to 2x to the negative 1/3. And this is 1 equal to x to the negative 1/3. X has to be equal to 1, and that's it. But the problem is this is wrong, because what happened is this is f prime x. You have to change to a fraction, and if you have fraction, you must combine fraction. So combine fraction, that means you need to multiply this by x to the 1/3 over x to the 1/3. And that's going to be x to the 1/3 on the bottom, 2x to the 1/3 minus 2, f prime of x. Now remember, this is equal to 0. Because the bottom part equal to 0 is also a critical number, because that's called vertical tangent. Because there's a cusp at 0. 2x to the 1/3 minus 2 equal to 0, so 2x to the 1/3 equal to 2. X 1/3 equal to 1, x equal to 1. So there is a 2 critical number. One is occur at horizontal tangent and one occur at vertical tangent. Then you say, okay, well, let's do a t-chart. Remember, Samuel asking, do we plug in the derivative or we plug in original? We plug in original because we're trying to get an output, the value, not the slope. So I'm gonna plug in, hold on, I need to give you an interval. I'm sorry, it should be -1 to 3. Safe Office is calling. It's not safe. Hello? Who? Tom? What's the last name? Huh? Trend. Oh, okay. Yeah, she's next period. So I'm gonna plug in -1 and 3. See, now I don't have to plug in every value because there's a 0, there's 1. I'm plugging 0 and 1. I'm skipping 2 because this is the endpoint again, and this is critical number, right? I'm just gonna give you a value. If you plug in -1, it's gonna give you -5. And if you plug in 0, it's gonna be 0. This is -1. And this value you have to use calculator. So it's -0.24. So your maximum happened where? Yeah, absolute max. And what's absolute min? -5. So that's a value, right? That's the things I'm paying attention to. How much time I have?
2 minutes, 3 minutes.
3 minutes? Okay, we're gonna do one more. There was a trick one. And you're gonna be like, no, I don't want to do a trick. And luckily, trick is not very emphasized on AP exam, at least not in AB. But still, I'm gonna treat you like I'm gonna teach you calculus. I'm not gonna treat you just like I'm teaching you AP exam. AP exam is stupid. That's why Harvard, MIT, they don't accept AP exam. Because they know people who got a 5 is not qualified for them to go move on to the next course. Because like I say, half the people don't qualify, which is 19% of people who have 5. That makes only 9.5% of people who understand the actual calculus. Rest of 90%, nobody understand them, even people who got a 5. So in this particular case, it's a critical number. It's a little bit hard. So what's derivative of 2 sine of x?
2 cosine of x.
2 cosine of x. Good. Now I'm gonna ask a specific person here. Max, can you tell me what's derivative of cosine of 2x? You are almost right, but it's not right. Samuel? Nope, almost right, but it's not right. And then?
It's -2 sine 2x, and then it's positive since
-2 sine of 2x. Because they are 2 layer. You have to take a derivative of cosine, which is negative sine, and a 2x, and then times derivative of the inside is 2. So that makes 2 cosine of x plus 2 sine of 2x. Now, it's possible to find 0 here. Is yes or no? The thing is no, because 2 cosine of x plus this one is need to change. So be 2 times 2 sine of x cosine of x. You guys can go. I'll just finish recording this. You can watch the last part. So 2 cosine of x plus 4 sine of x cosine of x equal to 0. I can factor out 2 cosine of x. That's going to be 1 plus 2 sine of x. So cosine of x equal to 0 when? X is equal to what? Pi over 2. 3 pi over 2. 1 plus 2 sine of x equal to 0. So sine of x is equal to -1/2. When does that happen? 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. You have to do a t-chart on all the value. I'm going to give you all the value just in case. 0 and 2 pi. And that's going to be pi over 2. 7 pi over 6. 3 pi over 2. 11 pi over 6. And the value is going to be -1. 3. -3 over 2. -1, -3 over 2, and -1. Bye. And you can take a picture of this, it's fun.
-3.
Bye. -3 over 2. What? Can you post on the group chat?
Wait, Mr. I would just allow us to get as much numbers as we want.
No, we only you identify critical number. We only plug in the critical number.
So we only need 2 critical numbers, 2 endpoints. and then
Not
the-
necessarily two. In this case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 critical. There's always 2 endpoint because there's one end to the other end.
So 2 endpoints and all your critical numbers
Yes.
on the table.
Yes.
It doesn't matter like how separated they are.
What do you mean how separate?
Like what if it's like 1, 15?
Yeah, it doesn't
24,
matter.
negative- Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
because that's a critical number, so it doesn't
Okay.
matter.
There you
Bye,
go.
Mr. Gay.
What was wrong with my
No, it's just pretty unique. Nobody ever used that.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what if I convert the cosine first at the beginning?
Do you need to take it out?
Huh?
Do you want me to take it out?
Okay, yeah. Bye.
What if I converted the cosine to s at the beginning to like sine squared minus?
I think that'll just make it worse.
It does.
I mean, it's still gonna be fun. It should result its active and
I'm going crazy over it.
what's up?
Very much. How are you doing?
Okay. Survival.
Huh?
Surviving.
The GBA cross country is almost over, so I'll be able to come after school sometimes.
Cool. Can't wait. Happy to fill in.
Yeah, I'll be using
Ping pong.
I'll be Alan ping pong.
Alan's got a lot better, but he still suck.
I think it's last year.
You know who went to ping pong yesterday? Julian. Tennis player. He's the number 1 tennis player in the school or no? What is he?
He was
What?
last year, so it's like the magnitude.
He says he's number 1 this year. I don't know.
For what?
That's not true.
That's not true.
He's number 1 of people that actually go to school. Because like our top 2 are like multiple Mormons.
Top 2 is what?
They're like multiple, they play for a team.
Oh, they don't play for the team.